Hello. Thank you for joining me. This is my first day sharing the passages that are most prominent to me and my synthesis of the focus topics from Book 30 in my Book a Week series, Alan Watts, Out of Your Mind. There are so many focus topics in this book that I could hone in on. Today, I want to speak a little bit to fear and how human beings work with fear and respond to fear and what it means to us and what it can come to mean to us. I think that fear is riding through each of our bodies in a different way. And I have experienced personally many different reflection points on the spectrum in dealing with my own fear. And I very much appreciate an opportunity to contrast those. So I want to speak a little bit to that now. I think that the human condition itself is a riddle that is quite a playground, and much of the adventuring that we're doing in the human condition involves fear, as it must, because the very foundation of the human condition is impermanent and insecure. And so every adventure that we quest upon as we navigate through human form involves fear. It will continue to. And I think that once we consider that, or once we remember or realize that, whatever we want to call it, in surrendering to that inevitability, we may find what we may call liberation from it. At other points in my life, I don't think that I could necessarily say that I had more fear than I have now. But what I was insistent upon in my goal orientation was rising above it, or getting away from it, or shielding myself from it. I was consistently, as a very ambitious person, trying to troubleshoot how to work my way around it. Now, when it enters my screen of experience, I am in no way surprised. I expect it. I'm very gentle with myself about it arising. And I notice that the biggest danger in expecting it is in maneuvering on the razor's edge, or the tightrope walk of connecting to my wonder in it, of refusing to, one could say, give up. But let me open that door a little further to describe what I mean by that. I will not allow myself to be defeated by it. One of my first responses and I expect that this is the case with many human beings, to an understanding that fear is inevitable, that pain is inevitable, was depression and a sensation of defeat. The routing for me out of the depressive response to that inevitability has been in opening myself to understanding the universality of that inevitability, that is something that we are all dealing with, because that really taps my compassion and opens me to considering what others are going through. And just that small opening that seems so small at the time is grand. It is not to be underestimated. And there are so many objections to considering others' suffering when we are ourselves in deep suffering. And the paradox there, or irony, or whatever you want to call it, surprise. Let's call it a surprise. Surprise there is that the opposite of what we expect is what happens there. When we are in deep suffering and we consider the suffering of others, that seed of compassion opens far beyond what we might expect and opens to another side of the same coin. And that is the very essence of why I might suggest that to anyone who is struggling in that way. The opening there, it may be everything to someone in that depressed state. It has been for me. I wonder if fear was accepted, how that may quell the storm between other human forms that also are, of course, inevitably feeling fear themselves, and in relationship to other coalitions or communities that are collectively working with fear, as we see so much evidence of globally today. Without further ado, I again express my appreciation for sharing this curriculum with you, and I'll move on toward today's readings. Enjoy.
Page 6. What is matter? It's a question that physicists once attempted to explore because they sought to understand the fundamental substance of the world. But that question, what is matter, is one they stopped asking long ago. See, in exploring the nature of matter, physicists realized they could only describe it in terms of behavior, in terms of form and pattern. In finding smaller and smaller particles, atoms, electrons, protons, all sorts of nuclear particles, you never arrive at any fundamental stuff. So you can only describe how it appears to act. What happens is this. We use the word stuff because that's how the world looks when our eyes are out of focus. We think of stuff as if it were some kind of undifferentiated goo, but that's merely because our vision is fuzzy. When we focus, we're able to see forms and patterns, and all we can really talk about is patterns. The picture of the world offered by the most sophisticated efforts of physics today is not one of formed stuff or potted clay, but patterns. Self-moving, self-designing, dancing patterns. But our common sense hasn't yet caught up with this new picture. Page 10. You and I are as continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. The ocean waves, the universe peoples. But we have been hypnotized, literally hypnotized, into feeling and sensing that we exist as separate entities inside our own skin. We don't identify with the original Big Bang. We think we are just something out on the end of it. So we're all scared stiff because our wave is going to disappear and we're going to die. And that's going to be just awful. As one priest I know is fond of saying, we're nothing, but something happens between the maternity ward and the crematorium. And that's the mythology we're operating under, which is why everyone feels unhappy and miserable. Page 14. Any good scientist knows that what you call the external world is as much you as your own body. Your skin doesn't actually separate you from the world. It's a bridge through which the world flows into you and you flow into the world. You're just like a whirlpool. The whirlpool has a definite form, but at no time does water stay put in it. The whirlpool is something the stream is doing, just as we are things the whole universe is doing. So if I meet you again tomorrow, I'll recognize you as the same whirlpool I saw yesterday, but you're moving. The whole world is moving through you. Cosmic rays, oxygen, the stream of steaks and milk and eggs you eat, everything flows right through you. You're a wiggle, and the world is wiggling you. Page 20. We are aware of reality and have symbols that represent reality. We have wealth and money that represent a kind of wealth. But if you don't realize that the symbol is secondary, it doesn't have the same value. It's like when you go to the supermarket, gather a cartload of goodies and roll up to the cashier. He says, "That'll be $75, please." And we get depressed because we don't recognize that we just traded $75 worth of symbolic paper for an actual cartload of goodies. We just think we lost $75. See, the real wealth is in the cart, but we're depressed because in our system, the symbol has become more valuable than the reality. Money represents power and potentiality, whereas wealth, well, we just think that the food is something that's ordinary and necessary because we have to eat. And that's really mixed up. But if you awaken from the illusion and understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or rather, death implies life, you can begin to feel yourself. You can feel that you're not just a stranger in the world, that you're not something here on probation, that you're not fundamentally some sort of fluke. And you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. What you are, basically, deep, deep down and far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself. Page 22. Instead of thinking that you're a victim of a mechanical world or an autocratic God, try this on. The life you're living is what you have put yourself into, only you won't admit it because you want to play the game that it has happened to you. But instead of blaming your father for getting horny for your mother and expecting both of them to take responsibility for your crummy life since they brought you into the world, try considering that you were the shining gleam in your father's eye when he approached your mother, and that it was your intention that led you to become deliberately involved in this particular existence. And even if you've had a terrible life, rife with syphilis and tuberculosis and the Siberian itch, it has all, nevertheless, been a game. And isn't that an optimal hypothesis? Do you see yourself as a victim of the world, or do you see yourself as the world? If you define yourself merely as the voluntary network of your nervous system, then you've defined yourself as a victim in the game. And so you feel that life is some kind of trap imposed on you by God or fate or the cosmic mechanism. And you can live out your life as some poor little me. On the other hand, you could also include in your definition of yourself that which you do involuntarily. You define yourself as the whole works. You beat your own heart, you grow your own hair. No one imposes this upon you. You're not a victim. You are doing it. You might not be able to explain how you do it because it would take too long and words are boring and clumsy. Regardless, you can claim your life and proclaim with gusto, I'm responsible. Whether comedy or tragedy, you did it. This seems a better basis for going on. It's fundamentally more joyous and profitable and interesting. When I was a child, I often imagined what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. But if you think about that long enough, another question will come to you. That is, what was it like to wake up after having never gone to sleep? I mean, what was it like to wake up when you were born? See, you can't have the experience of nothing. So after you're dead, the only thing that can happen is the same experience that happened when you were born. After people die, other people are born, and they're all you. It's just that you can only experience one life at a time. Wherever beings exist throughout all the galaxies, you are all of them. When they come into being, that's you coming into being. Page 30. Some people will use the symbolism of God as a brilliant light, only somehow veiled, hiding underneath all the forms you see. But the truth is actually funnier than that. You're looking at the brilliant light right now. The experience you're having right now, which you might call ordinary, everyday consciousness, is it. And when you find that out, you laugh yourself silly. That's the great discovery. Page 31. The Buddha said that we suffer because we desire. So if we can give up desire, we won't suffer. But that isn't the last word. That was merely the opening to a greater dialogue. See, if you tell someone to get rid of desire, all they end up doing is desiring not to desire. You can't give up desire. It's like telling someone to be unselfish or get rid of their ego or let go and relax. Why would you want to do all that? Only because you're trying to beat the game. Because you're still operating under the hypothesis that you are different from the universe. So you want to get one up on it. And competing with the universe just reveals that you don't understand that you are the universe. You still think there's a real difference between self and other. But the two are mutually necessary, just like the poles on a magnet.